If you have an unquenchable thirst to crush your bucket list, relentlessly pursue your dreams, and live life on your own terms, then turn up the volume and tune in. You're now listening to Zeph and Moses Blacksburg on the Year of Purpose podcast.
Zeph and Blacksburg here with another round of the Year of Purpose podcast, and today I'm joined by Jahnke. Now, Corey provides the blueprints, strategies, and game plans that take corporate and independent business owners from struggling to do more with less to absolutely crushing it. But more importantly, with his years in a pharmacy, he created his Prescription For Sanity System. He takes even the most hopeless situations and turns them into shining examples of successful turnarounds. A go-giver certified coach, Corey joins us today to talk about following life's passions and discovering your purpose for living. And Corey, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited because I just think that your podcast is one of the best ones out there.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that you have a lot of really great input on just on life in general and a lot of things going on because of your unique position. You know, you see a lot of hurting and a lot of sick people working in a pharmacy. And so I think you're kind of at the forefront of seeing the big problem today and the big problem is we're not healthy in many ways, you know, mentally, physically, psychologically, and I think that we're not really living life. I think we're band-aiding life so that we can try to deal with it. Would you say that's true?
Oh, I think so. I think so many people are living for a future that hasn't happened yet. You know, so often in the pharmacy, we hear things like, well, when I retire, ... And then we see that same person. You know, I've been a pharmacist since 1989. Then I'll see that same person either never make it to retirement or make it to retirement in such lousy shape that they're not enjoying anything. So I think a big thing that would really help people is to understand that you don't live on the weekends. You don't live someday. You don't live when you're on vacation. You live every day.
Yeah.
And I think that, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I was just going to say that's so important, and I think we've all kind of lost sight of that.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing the joy in the moment. You know, one of the things that helped me when I was struggling a few years back, you know, when the anxiety of life and even the depression of life had sort of hit you, you know, in your mid 40s, what happens is you go, you know, if I've got to do this JOB for the next 25 years, I'm going to die inside.
Yeah.
And that's when you take that time and you ask yourself, you know, if no one told me who I was, you know, you're the pharmacist, you're the father of a young child, you're a husband, you're a son. But if no one told me who I was, who would I be? You know, who is that internal person that's Corey? And once I've figured that out, man, life has turned around like crazy.
That's
and
awesome.
I've been able to help other people figure out that, you know what? You're not all these narratives. You're just a person trying to make the most of what you have. But the way to do that, I think, is to help other people make the most of what they have. Wouldn't you say that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it has to be kind of like a selfless thing. You know, we didn't have a choice entering this world, right? Like our parents never kind of called us up and said, hey, do you want to come into existence? But I think that we do have a choice to make the best out of it while we're here. And while some people think that, oh, well, that means I just need to work on myself, it actually means you need to work on other people because you need to leave your legacy and leave your change behind. And the only way to do that is by impacting others.
Oh, yeah, because you know what happens is that most people try to live life front to back. What am I going to do next? And what am I going to do after that? You know, you look at your schedule and you try to figure out, you know, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I want to tell you something that, you know what? I learned a huge lesson when the 9/11 thing happened. And I'll tell you why. Because I know for a fact where I was. I was sitting at a time just like this, having coffee with my wife, and we were discussing what we were going to do this coming weekend. And then my sister-in-law called and said, oh man, you got to see what's happening on TV and so forth. And it all of a sudden occurred to me, 5,000 people didn't get a weekend, right? So I'm over here talking about what I'm going to do 5 days from now instead of what I'm going to do now, what I'm going to do today. And then I learned something that changed my life. I read a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And Stephen Covey talked about living life from back to front, meaning, you know what? Go ahead and picture your own funeral. Picture what's going on. What are they saying about you? What are they thinking about you? And what kind of an impact did you have? In other words, if you died 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or even next week, what would you want people to say about you? What would you want to have stood for? What message would you want associated with Zeph and Blackbird? And then go ahead and say, hey, if I want that to be true, what do I do now? What do I need to do going forward to make that true? And when you start living life that way, you start realizing that 99% of your happiness is how you interact with and how you affect other people. You know, when you walk out of a room, if people are better because you left, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But if people are better because you were there, you're doing something right. Does that make sense?
It does, but my only concern is I don't want to live in fear of death, right? Like I want to live knowing that what I want to accomplish by the time I pass away has made a difference, right? Because like I don't want to look at it as, oh well, I could die, so I'm just gonna do this. I mean, the truth is, yes, you could pass away at any moment, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to live in fear to motivate myself to do these things.
Oh, I agree. And that's why it's so enriching and so alive to look at your legacy. Because what you can say is, you know what? I know, I know in my heart of hearts that I was either impacting others in a positive way or I was in hot pursuit. What I want you to know about me is that I'm in hot pursuit of my goals, of my dreams, of the things that I want to make happen, right? Because so many people are waiting for a someday. Someday I'm going to lose 25 pounds. Someday I'm going to get serious and really sit down with my kids and tell them how much I love them. But someday being not guaranteed is actually very freeing, right? Because if I say, hey, Stefan, you know what? I really like you. I think you're a good guy. And I do. But I'm not afraid to tell you that. Whereas most people are guarded. Well, what if he thinks I'm weird? Well, what if he thinks this? Or what if. But when you live in a space where you know that you're just part of the greater infinite, and someday you're going to be, for lack of a better word, recycled, then you know that now is the time to be free to do whatever you want in terms of your impact. And I want you to understand that a lot of people think that they're free to do whatever they want in terms of instant gratification. And this is the big trap we all fall in because most of the time we don't die next week. And so then we're left with the residual value of our decisions, right?
Sure.
So what you do is you plan for a future in case you have one, and you live for that vision of who you are ultimately meant to be today. And you make sure that today you do something to advance you towards that greater cause, towards that vision of that person you are ultimately destined to be. Now, the big question, and I'm asking you this, is how do you figure out who that person is?
Well, I would say I feel like you need to start with a foundation. And here's where I love kind of sharing a piece of my journey was that, you know, I was, I feel that I was a relatively broken person, at least emotionally, in about August of last year. And so for me, a lot of discovering, myself and that foundation comes out of traveling and kind of being on my own to adventure and just kind of tap into like, I've always had that sort of childish spirit. I always love just goofing off and having a good time and being around people. So for me, it started with traveling, but I think you have to get back to that core because at the end of the day, you have to look out for number one. And you have to start there because if you can't be good to yourself, then how can you be good to others?
Oh, yeah. And I think that's really important because one of the things that most people are doing is they're living in a space that's not them. They don't know how do they be free. I love the word you used, childish spirit, because you know what? It's okay to be who you are. You know, I'm a huge Disney fan. I'm a huge Pixar fan. And when you watch a Disney movie, you can actually be in that movie if you release yourself, right? But a
Yeah.
lot of people are, oh, well, that's for kids because, or a lot of people can't even enjoy Christmas because Christmas is for kids or whatever their holiday is. And what's weird is everything is for everybody. The most fun people are the people that will get down on the floor with a 2-year old and do the thing because they can enter their world. But if you're too stiff and too unrelaxed to be able to truly enjoy your life in the way that you were meant to do it, you're just opening up this space for unhappiness and misery. And what I find is that most people, as they go through their life, become so serious that they lose themselves. I mean, we were all meant to do something, and whatever it is that you were meant to do, it's okay. In fact, it's part of the grand overall design. I mean, there's a design that says that Zephyr Blacksburg
Yep.
was meant to do something different than Corey Jahnke was meant to do. But unfortunately, we're lost in this business of trying to be what's expected. And you know what's really expected? What's expected is for you to step into your greatness. You have greatness in you, but you have to give yourself permission to do that. And when you don't, your subconscious knows it. And you're walking around with this gap, if you will. And that gap turns into anxiety, it turns into depression, it turns into unhappiness, and that permeates everything. See, you are nothing more than an energy field walking around, right? And so, what do you make other people feel from your energy? Because do you know that people don't listen to what you say? They watch what they do and they feel who you are, right? And, what is it like 89% of communication is nonverbal?
Yeah.
So, your major definite purpose in life is to become as large an energy field as possible, as positive and amazing energy field as possible, but your energy field that's designed to do what you do. So, how do you think we can get in touch with that?
Man, that's a toughie. I'd imagine that being present is a huge part of that because, kind of going back to the whole, our minds are often in the future, in the past. They're never really here today, right now. Um, and I'd probably say that it probably takes asking a lot of questions.
I believe that. I believe it requires writing those things down. In other words, I think our hand knows something that our brain doesn't necessarily know or want to admit to. But sometimes when you just sit down and, I went to a seminar given by Darren Hardy from Success Magazine in California a couple of years back. And, I sat on my office couch for almost 6 weeks straight.
Hmm.
In other words, instead of trying to create projects, instead of trying to create videos like I had been doing, I stopped and I just listened. What arises when you start thinking about what's truly important to me? And I would just make notes in my notebook. And what I noticed as I started looking back on my notes is there were themes coming up that I didn't necessarily know were important to me until I looked back at it. Unfortunately, most people are trapped in this world of what's expected. So if I say to them, I say, "Hey, Julie, how are you doing?" And she'll tell me this story about, well, Stephen has a soccer game and Julie has a basketball game and so forth. And I said, "Well, how are you doing?" "Well, We're over here at the PTA. How are you doing? And she doesn't want to admit that she doesn't have a you, right? So I think what's important is that everybody figures out that what is it that turns you on? What would get you up early and keep you up late that you really got excited about, that you really enjoyed? You know, if there were no other people to cast an opinion upon you, what would you want to do? And so when I'm coaching people with my clients, the first question that I ask them goes just like this. Zephin, and I'm asking you right now, for you to know that 2015 was the year that turned everything on its head for you, was the year that you totally felt like you crushed it. What would have to be true at 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, 2015? What would have to be true for you to know that this was your best year ever?
Well, I would probably go back to, I have this really great list here of when I looked at what I wanted for 2015, because everybody writes down their goals and the things that they want to do. So I think I'd have to at least go back to, what was it that I wanted when I started 2015, and look through to see how, so I've got it here actually, and look through to see how um, these things changed over time, because I think that your why probably changes a little bit. So, here's a great example was I wanted to grow the podcast to 100,000 downloads. And we're just about to pass that barrier, and we're only in our 7th month out of the year. And the
Outstanding.
podcast actually started at the very end of January, so it's really only been about 6 months. So halfway through the year, we're about to pass that goal. But I think that I'd probably have to sit down and question my why, not necessarily the what of what I wanted to accomplish this year, but my why, and see if my why stayed the same. Because I think if my why stayed the same, that means that I'm in alignment with the things that I wanted to do at the beginning of the year, and I stayed in alignment throughout the year in doing those things and seeing them through.
Outstanding. Alignment is a great word. So now the second question then becomes, if you were going to head and then explain to other people, you know what? If the following is true at the end of this year, I know I had my best year ever. Are the people that you surround yourself likely to say, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you want that? Or, man, you can do this. Who do you surround yourself with? Are you surrounding yourself with people that create narratives that hold you back or propel you forward?
I love this episode so far, and I want to take a brief moment to talk about improving yourself each day. I know you are a huge fan of living life on your own terms, but if there's one thing I've learned in my journey, we need to constantly grow and look to others who have been in our shoes, which is why I've partnered up with Audible to give you one free download of your choice from over 180,000 books. Start your free 30-day trial by visiting yearofpurpose.com/audible. Now back to the show. Yeah, I mean, I think that my friends, have been surprisingly supportive throughout the entire year. I actually don't even think I expected as much support as I have received so far, and so and I think this is because the people I surround myself motivate me, and I motivate them right back. And there many, if not all of them, are constantly striving for more, and to be better, and to live life fuller. And so I think that they'd probably agree with me that that I've made a difference, both in my life but in theirs too.
Outstanding. And that reminds me of something that a lot of people miss in life. You know what? You don't have nearly as many naysayers as your brain tells you that you do. In other words, haven't you noticed that once you started aiming for 100,000 downloads, more people jumped on your bandwagon than you ever thought were going to do that,
Yeah.
right? But you tell yourself this lousy story that says, well, if I try to do this big goal, everyone's going to say I'm foolish. Well, who's everyone? And why should I care? Because what happens is that your podcast is affecting people that you don't know right now. And so it's for those people that you have to totally propel yourself towards, because they're counting on you. And when you allow your negative stories, your negative influences to keep you from living your voice, you're actually stealing from the people that you could help with your message, are you not?
You are.
Right? Because someone out there is counting on your voice to get them through today and to give them the plan because they need to borrow your faith in them. One of the things that I really like about you is that you have a faith in humanity that most people don't have. And so other people need to borrow that faith to get them past what I call the sticking points. I think for most of us, there's these sticking points in life. So let's take, for example, you're going to start an exercise program or a diet plan. You talked about building new habits before in a conversation that we had. And what happens is that most people just need to overcome the inertia of getting started, getting past those sticking points. How am I going to cut my coffee down in half? But once they do that, they propel. So they need your voice. And that's whatever your voice is. It's not just you specifically, but for your audience. What is your voice that can help someone else get past the sticking point in their life? And if you allow yourself to hold you back or the people you surround yourself to hold you back, then what you're doing is stealing from those people. And I think that's back to your why. I think most people struggle with why. And they'll say things to you like, well, I wish I had $100,000. And you say, why? And if the answer is, I don't know, that would be nice, they're never going to get there.
Yeah.
But if the answer is because I could then start up a nonprofit that would help people who, one of the coolest ones I ever saw was the guy that wanted to bring water to India,
Mm.
and he had to go out and raise money, but he was able to visualize those people who are walking miles and miles and miles every day to find water. So they can't actually work because they got to get water, right? So they're stuck. And that his vision was so big, it propelled him to get over that fear of coming up to a big player and saying, hey, can you support my organization? I think that the why is so valuable because most of us struggle with courage because life, it can be scary. But you know what's weird? If you can use your why to get you over those sticking points, those fears, you're going to find out that, yeah, other people are looking for someone who can step up and get the ball rolling. I mean, it's amazing how many people, I think it's something like 80% of the population, know what to do, but they need someone with just enough courage to get it going so that they can help those people. So
So
when your why is strong enough, you can find those people.
yeah, and so I'm curious to hear, being a pharmacist, you prescribe medicines a lot. Let's write up a prescription. What does the world need right now that would fix 90, the 80/20 principle? So what is the 20% medicine that we could give out right now that would fix 80% of the world's problems?
Well, here's what I think it is. I think we have to realize that we want enlightened leaders. We want people in our government or in our organizations that are quality people. And we've been waiting for these people to show up. Those people are not coming until we become enlightened people, until we impact the people around us. So when I wrote my manifesto, I talked about superheroes. And I said that superheroes become the change they seek in the world. And everybody thinks that's poetry, right? We've read that before. Zephin, become the change that you seek in the world. But until we take it from poetry to reality, it's never going to get any better. And here's what I mean. You find what you go looking for. So people tell me often what a horrible place the world is, right? But there's other people who tell me what a beautiful place the world is. There's other people that tell me, well, the world's just an okay place. Here's the reality. The world is, was, and has always been an awful place, an okay place, or a wonderful place, depending on what you go looking for, right? So when you surround yourself with negative people and all you do is watch negative news and search out negative stories on the internet, your world is negative. But when you become a positive, amazing person, surrounding yourself with positive, amazing people, because guess what? Like attracts like, right? Negative people don't want to be around you. You annoy them.
Yeah.
Positive people are looking for you. So what happens is that you have to grow it out. You start with yourself and you say, you know what? What is it that I have to get truly, truly excited about? I remember years ago when I was about your age, I would go ahead and listen to Tony Robbins cassettes. And Tony Robbins would say, you know what? I just used the word cassette. You know what that is, don't you?
Of course. We don't use them
So
anymore.
you bet. But Tony Robbins would say, hey, in any failure that you have, you need to sit down and ask yourself, what's great about this? What could get me excited about this? It's what Napoleon Hill called in Think and Grow Rich the seed of an opportunity that exists in every failure, right? Instead of going, well, I failed, forget it, I'm never going to be any better, you say, hey, you know what? You know what I learned out of this? I learned A, B, C, and D, right? So in your life, you can become a magnet for a better life for those people around you. And so then what happens is, let's say you positively impact just 10 people in your life, and you make those 10 people, or you know what, let's use the number 12. So you got 12 people, right? How many disciples were there? 12 disciples, right? And I'm not saying whether you're a Christian or not. I'm just saying there were 12 disciples. Now all of a sudden there's millions of Christians in the world. Or Muhammad went out and started with his message, or Buddha went out and started with his message. Buddha started out with like 5 disciples. Now, how many Buddhists are there in the world, right? So those 12 disciples affect 12 other people. Now, suddenly you have 144 people that are affected. And those 144 multiplied by 12. And these are how movements started. This is how Gandhi mobilized something like 200 million people with no money, no resources, just a message. But here's the key. You got to believe enough in your message that you can willingly, openly, courageously spread your message. And that's how we change the world. That's how we improve the world. We start with our perspective. We start with our message. We start with courage. We start with believing in ourselves. And we impact people positively. We can't sit around and wait for other people to do it. I can't tell you in pharmacy, because of something called Obamacare, how many people want to blame President Obama for all the problems in the world, but no one's talking about what he should have done differently. No one's talking about what they would do, and no one's doing anything about what they perceive as the problems in the world. It's just easier to talk about it.
Yeah. So
Right? And
basically, we need someone to take action, and we need a lot of people to take action. We need that first person to step up to the plate and, hit the ball out of the park and have everyone in the crowd see that it's actually possible and to chase after trying to accomplish that too.
well, it's so important because one of the things that I've learned in life, you have all kinds of opportunities surrounding you. My wife has been working with a lady in a network marketing project that just totally did. She makes her living helping other people getting healthy. And her upline makes her living getting healthy, right? But then there's all these people who they recruit who say, well, it's impossible. I can't do that. And they're like, but we're doing it. Right? So you've got to get over those lousy stories that we tell ourselves that it's possible, but it's not really possible for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's an awful, awful phrase in the English language, and it's called I'm just. So if you're ever telling your story and your story sounds like I'm just Stefan, I'm just Corey, what can I do? That is a lousy story. And I want to be really transparent here and tell you how I learned it. One of the things that I am in life is a John Maxwell certified coach, right? And to get certified by John Maxwell, you have to go to a seminar. And I go to this seminar But before I went to the seminar, they had a Facebook group, right? And a couple of months before we go, whenever anybody would post anything, I'm trying to do this, and I would just say, hey, that's really cool and that's really great. Because I don't like people who hijack your Facebook post. If you say, well, I did this thing and it's really cool, and some guy goes, well, that was like the time that I did. I don't like that. So I was just doing that, right? So I go to this seminar and people are saying, well, what are you going to do after the seminar? And I would say, well, you got to understand, I've got all these responsibilities and all this stuff. And that was 5 years ago. And I kept hearing myself say that, and it was driving me crazy, but I kept saying it, right? Because I was so stuck in that narrative. And all of a sudden, this lady named Trisha pushes me against the wall. And she says, do you have any concept of who you are and how much these people look up to you because you've been encouraging them for all these months? And now you're going to come here and you're going to tell this lousy story about how tough you have it to break out of your bridge? Is there something wrong with you? She said that to me.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, it took almost 3 years for me to stop with that I'm just thing, right? So I'm encouraging people now to don't take 3 years. Take 3 minutes and just realize, you know what? All the famous people in the world, all the notorious people in the world, the only difference between them and you is they lost the phrase, I'm just, and they took that leap of faith, whatever that leap of faith is for you.
And I think we couldn't round out this episode on a better note than that, because I just read an article saying you need to remove just from your vocabulary because it makes you mediocre, right? It's basically you admitting that you don't have the potential to do anything great or to make a great accomplishment. I just went out and did this thing. I just did this. I just did that. Well, you didn't just do it. You didn't just win the Super Bowl. You worked your butt off for about 10 years, between college football and the NFL, and you worked out every single day, and you practiced and you practiced and you were coached and you had, teammates. You didn't just win the Super Bowl. So, I'm not saying that, everyone here has won the Super Bowl, but the point is, give yourself some credit, right?
Yeah, because no matter where you are on the ladder of success, there's always going to be someone lower than you. And you're thinking, well, I'm looking at the guys above me, but there's people on the ladder lower than you looking up going, wow, look what this guy's doing. He's got 100,000 downloads. So imagine the effect on your listeners if you hadn't started this podcast. Imagine the effect of the world if Gandhi just said, well, I'm just Mahatma Gandhi. I can't make any difference. Imagine the difference on the world if Abraham Lincoln said, well, I'm just Abraham Lincoln, right? The only difference between them and anyone else is that they didn't give in to that internal voice that told them they were afraid. One of the things that I truly believe is that there are internal villains and there are external villains. And I'm actually launching an online course. It's going to be a $1 course called the Superhero Leadership Academy because I want you to overcome those 5 internal villains: fear, doubt, guilt, overwhelm, and worry. Those 5 villains cost us more in terms of happiness, in terms of financial security, and in terms of overall fulfillment than any of the external villains that you'll ever meet.
And so where's the best place for people to check out, more information about this $1 course that you have and any other resources that you have online?
Well, my CoreyJahnke.com website will be launching August 1st, and it's going to have access to everything that I have available. And a large part of what I have available is absolutely free because I want people to get to know me and I want them to get to know themselves. So that's CoreyJahnke.com, and that'll be launching August 1st, 2015. And I guarantee you, we're going to help you impact your life so that you can impact other people's lives in an amazingly positive way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Corey. And, thank you for sharing some more of your time with me. It's always great speaking with you. And, thanks for being on the Year of Purpose podcast.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. And I really want you to go out and make your new goal 1 million downloads because I know that you're impacting people in an amazingly positive way.
We'll do it. Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Year of Purpose podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave us a rating and review if you loved this episode. Now, are you ready to live life on your own terms? Head on over to www.yearofpurpose.com right now for the tools, resources, and the roadmap to living a life rescripted. And tune in next week for another episode of the Year of Purpose.